Good evening. For the first time in 441 days, a family in Mumbai is celebrating. On 3rd March 2016, their son, former naval officer Kulbhushan Jadhav and now a businessman, was abducted by Pakistani authorities and charged with espionage. On 10th April this year, he was sentenced to death by a Pakistani military court. India's repeated requests for consular access were rejected, forcing New Delhi to knock on the doors of the International Court of Justice. Today, the court ruled in India's favour, staying Jadhav's sentencing and rejecting Pakistan's arguments on jurisdiction and consular access. India stands vindicated. But the battle is far from over. On Gravitas tonight, we look at the road ahead. And Palki Sharma Upadhyay, the headlines first. Former FBI Chief Robert Mueller appointed special counsel to lead the Russia probe. Donald Trump lashes out, calls it the biggest political witch hunt in American history. Pakistan rejects Musharraf's demands for military security and a safe passage to Dubai to face trial. He's been charged with high treason. Zomato, India's largest online restaurant guide, hit by a security breach. The company denies reports that credit and debit card details of its 17 million users have been stolen. Russia launches the first ever ferry service to North Korea to serve tourists and workers. It will travel between Vladivostok and Rajin once a week. And more than 50 people killed in Islamic State attacks in 2 government-held villages in Syria's Hama province. Also on the show, our special focus, Iran goes to polls tomorrow. We'll talk about what's at stake, why the world is watching closely, the key contenders and the issues. And Trump goes to Saudi Arabia to sell America's biggest arms package worth $350 billion. All the details coming up. But the big story today came from The Hague. The International Court of Justice gave a point-by-point rebuttal of the Pakistani arguments in the Kulbhushan Jadhav case and stayed his sentencing pending trial at the World Court. It's a big win for India, both legally and diplomatically, though justice for Jadhav is far from achieved. Take a look at how the court rejected every contention of the Pakistani counsel.
The jurisdiction under the Vienna Convention of 1963 is not as untrammeled as my learned friend has suggested. It is limited.
It is sufficient at this point to note that the provisions of the 2008 agreement do not impose expressly such a limitation. Therefore, the Court considers that there is no sufficient basis to conclude at this stage that the 2008 agreement prevents it from exercising its jurisdiction under Article 1 of the optional protocol over disputes relating to the interpretation or the application of Article 36 of the Vienna Convention. Consequently, the Court considers that it has prima facie jurisdiction under Article 1 of the optional protocol to entertain the dispute between the parties.
Pursuant to the bilateral agreement between India and Pakistan of 2008, which India is anxious to avoid any reference to, the question of access to Commander Jadhav would be decided on the merits.
The Court notes that the acts alleged by India are capable of falling within the scope of Article 36, paragraph 1 of the Vienna Convention, which, inter alia, guarantees the right of the sending state to communicate with and have access to its nationals.
Unfortunately, the court was not provided with the substantive material which was given to India on the 23rd of January 2017, but it has now.
Mr. Jadhav has been in the custody of Pakistani authorities since the 3rd of March 2016, although the circumstances of his arrest remain in dispute between the parties.
There were 4 stages of the trial, 21st of September to the 12th of February 2017. The clemency process was identified clearly, the timeline, 90 days plus 60 days.
Under the present circumstances, it is appropriate for the court to order that Pakistan shall take all measures at its disposal to ensure that Mr. Jadhav is not executed pending the final decision in these proceedings, and shall inform the court of all the measures taken in implementation of the present order.
And joining us this evening on Gravitas, Captain Raghu Raman, former soldier with us from Mumbai, Surbhi Ranganathan, fellow at the Lauterpacht Centre for International Law, joining us from London. Michael Kugelman, Senior Associate for South Asia Programme at the Woodrow Wilson Centre in Washington, and Mandy Clark, our London Bureau Chief, who is tracking all the legal proceedings at The Hague for us. Good evening to everyone. Captain Raman, let's start with you. How big a win do you think this is?
Personally, I don't think it's such a big win. I think we are mistaking some tactical steps where we have gained for a temporary period, a respite as some major victory. I think we have to look at the bigger picture of how Pakistan has been seizing initiative over the last few months and parading one incident after another. They are basically using, whether it's a beheading of our soldiers or retaliation to surgical strikes, or in this particular case, capturing an individual and parading him for the whole world, more to seize the initiative and retain the initiative. And so, for a moment, even if we were to assume that, yes, the International Court of Justice, Pakistan is not bound by them. It's a country which hid the world's public enemy number 1 for years, and then claimed complete ignorance about Osama bin Laden hiding in Pakistan. So I think we are dealing with a nation which uses several different methods to keep the tension between India and Pakistan alive. So personally, I don't believe this is a major victory. If anything, we have a mere tactical step forward, but I think the initiative still lies with Pakistan.
Surbhi, you know the law better than anyone else on the panel. In procedural terms, at least, India has a leg up, would you say?
Well, look, yes, this is, it's a good outcome. It is also an expected outcome. This is in most cases where the court has been asked to indicate provisional measures that involve consular access and death penalty issues. The court has indicated provisional measures. So this is completely expected. It is a good thing. It's certainly good news for Mr. Jadhav. But this is by no means indicative of what the final outcome will be. And also, we have to think quite carefully about what sorts of final relief the court can give, which might be quite different from what some of the discussion in the media is suggesting it might be. And I'd be happy to talk about that later if you'd like.
Sure. Michael Kugelman, this is just the first step, the round 1, as the Ministry of External Affairs put it. But the fact is that the ICJ, in its decision, in its order today, gave a point-by-point rebuttal of Pakistan's arguments that A, the ICJ does have jurisdiction in a case like this, B, consular access should have been granted to Kulbhushan Jadhav, and the Vienna Convention does not expressly exclude cases of espionage if this indeed is a case of espionage. How does this reflect on Pakistan?
Well, absolutely, as one of your previous guests said, this is a tactical victory. And I think that it reflects rather poorly on Pakistan. I think that India simply did a much better job of preparing for this case. And, in my view, it really came down to a very simple matter of consular access. That was the major intention, that India wanted to ensure that Mr. Jadhav could get consular access, which had been repeatedly denied to him by Pakistan. And I think that the argument that was made by the Indian legal team really revolved around that point, how it was essential for him to receive that type of that legal access, that consular access. Whereas on the Pakistan side, there was a lot of focus on his confession and things like that really, in the context of the case, were really irrelevant. And I think now Pakistan is in a position where it really needs to heed the verdict of this court. Pakistan always worries about its image overseas. It has a credibility problem, and if it were now to simply reject or ignore the verdict of a respected international court of law, that'll, I think, make it look like even more of a pariah than many folks around the world think it already is. Now, that said, of course, the court was not telling Pakistan to release Mr. Jadhav. It was not telling him that he could not be executed. It was basically just saying that the execution should be stayed and that he should be given consular access. So it goes back to what was said earlier. This is not a huge victory for India. It's certainly a tactical victory. It's one step in the right direction of where India wants to go, but still there's a lot of work to be done, so to speak, and it remains to be seen how exactly Pakistan will react or what it will do at this point.
You mentioned the confessional video, Mandy. That was one of the setbacks for the Pakistani counsel, the fact that they were not allowed to present it in the hearing on Monday. And many critics have spoken up against the poor planning, the poor preparation of the Pakistani side in Islamabad too.
Yeah, that certainly would seem to have taken the defense strategy by surprise. Just around an hour before they were due to present their case, they were testing the audio of that alleged confession. But the judges told the defense team that they didn't want to use it as evidence. They didn't feel it was appropriate. And it seemed to have left a hole in their defense strategy. And certainly there was a big time gap. So that each side were given 90 minutes to present their case. The Pakistan side only used half of it, around 40 minutes. So it seemed to have really caught them off guard when they were not allowed to use that confession.
Captain Raghuraman, I'm looking at reactions. The Pakistan Foreign Ministry has said that we will present solid evidence. The Pakistan Attorney General has said that we shouldn't have participated in these proceedings in the first place. So we do not know who's calling the shots yet. We know that the military is firmly in control as far as this case is concerned, among other things in Pakistan. Where does this leave India and the case? Do we believe that Pakistan is going to go back to court and take it forward?
Pakistan doesn't need to play by any rules, which, I mean, we have seen historically, they can say one thing today, say another thing tomorrow. They have been caught on several occasions giving multiple versions of a set of events. So I don't think we can war game what the Pakistani military, which, as you rightly said, is controlling pretty much all the shots, including this one and everything else in the country, including their foreign policy and the national security narrative. So if you are trying to war game them on the basis of what India would do or what any other nation which has a different set of norms, both internally and externally, then I think we'll go wrong completely. I think we, knowing Pakistan and knowing the agility with which they have the ability to move their positions, it's quite, I think the right thing for India to do is to keep all the options open and not believe or depend. I mean, we have had our Indian citizens who have been incarcerated in Pakistani jails being killed by fellow prisoners. So instances like that have happened in the past as well. And Pakistan has dismissed it as a fight between two or three inmates, and the Indian prisoner has died. So expecting that the norms which we would normally accord to treatment of prisoners in other countries, including India, would be exactly the same ones that would be followed in Pakistan, I think it's expecting too much.
Surabhi, one of the ministers in India has said that we will seek consular access again. The court did make some observations and said that Pakistan should have provided consular access to Jadhav. Do today's observations change anything, and should India hope for Pakistan to change its position?
Not yet. The order of the to just the stay. The court doesn't order Pakistan to grant consular access. So, of course, India can request consular access afresh, but Pakistan is under no duty to provide consular access. That duty, whether or not Pakistan has a duty to provide consular access and whether it's breached that duty, is what is going to get decided at the merit stage. And it's only at that stage that we'll hear about what the relief might be given to India if it is found that Pakistan has breached its consular access provisions. But certainly, I agree with the gentleman who spoke before me in that India should certainly keep its diplomatic efforts ongoing, because there is a limit to what the ICJ can say, and the ICJ's judgment should not be seen as the solution or the substitute for diplomacy between the two countries at a bilateral level.
And that's exactly where the rub lies. Michael Kugelman, diplomatic efforts with whom? Is the Sharif government in control of this case? There are conflicting reports coming out of Pakistan. Some say that Nawaz Sharif and team are happy that the military has been exposed internationally for its misadventures. Others say that Sharif is feeling the heat because he's getting all the flack for the way this case went.
Well, certainly there's reason to believe that the Prime Minister is much more conciliatory toward India, or would want to be more conciliatory toward India than would the security establishment in Pakistan. And we know that, as was mentioned before, the security establishment is really in the driver's seat when it comes to most public policies in Pakistan, including foreign policy, and particularly relations with India. So that said, of course, I ultimately don't know who has the upper hand in this particular case, though one does have to wonder if the always fraught civil-military relationship in Pakistan could once again be aggravated if it is true that the government in Pakistan wanted to be in a position where it would heed this verdict from the ICJ, and if the military does not want to do that and wants to remain defiant and continue to cite national security justification, that's indicating that there's no reason to listen to whatever an outside court may have to say. Obviously, as you know, the relationship between the civilians and the military has always been up and down, and even though the military calls the shots, so to speak, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have some pushback from the civilians in power. Nawaz Sharif, I think, is not as feisty, so to speak, as he used to be when he was prime minister at previous times, when he pushed back against the military much more, and it ended up getting him booted out of power. But certainly, we do have to wonder what this will mean, what this verdict will mean for the state of civil-military relations in Pakistan.
Captain Raghu Raman, do you want to weigh in on this? How do you think this case is going to change the civil-military relationship in Pakistan?
I don't think this case has any significance towards the civil-military relationships in Pakistan. I think we have all studied Pakistan for decades, and we know deep down that Pakistani military is the de facto ruling party in Pakistan. Their foreign ministers, their home ministers, their home secretaries are just titular heads, because when it comes to anything that is meaningful, anything that requires a substantial climb down from a position or an alteration of a position, it's the military which calls the shots. So to my mind, if I were to just wargame this from their perspective, they are using this incident to show this new shiny thing which is going to happen. It'll grab a lot of media attention, it'll get a lot of headlines, and this will continue for months until they find something else to aggravate this situation between India and Pakistan. So essentially the Pakistani military's message is that if you want to talk to Pakistan, you have to talk to us. You can't be talking to the civilian government. And this is a message that they have driven from the Kargil attacks to what is happening in the borders, to every instance where we try rapprochement with the counterparts, the civilian counterparts, which we have to, because we are a democracy, so we have to talk to our democratic counterparts. The military steps in to show that they are the ones who call the shots, and they are the ones who need to be spoken to.
Right. Mandy, another worry in the Indian establishment is, while we're fighting this case and while we're calling today's development a victory, there's been no proof of life of Kulbhushan Jadhav. We do not know what his status is.
Exactly, and that was one of India's main arguments, that there has been no consular access. Simply, they don't know where he's being held and what condition he's in, or even if in fact he is alive. and ultimately this ruling is not binding. Pakistan doesn't necessarily have to listen to the judge's appeal for a stay of execution, and that is a concern. The main hope is that this international spotlight and pressure will be enough to make Pakistan think twice about going ahead with an execution and really listening and respecting the judgment that was heard today.
Surbhi, what happens in the case next is if Pakistan refuses to comply and refuses to participate henceforth, what are India's options?
Okay, so just to clarify a couple of things. So I think we need to make a distinction here between binding and enforceable. The ruling is binding. The court has previously confirmed this in other consular access cases, that when it indicates provisional measures, they have to be followed by states. And violating a provisional measure that has been ordered, so violating a stay in this case, will lead to state responsibility. Enforceability, if Pakistan chooses not to comply, is a different question. That's a more complicated question, because basically what you need then is to hope that the Security Council might step in and at its discretion and secure compliance. We know that there are many difficulties with that process. In terms of what the court can do, where we go from here. So now, of course, there'll be many more hearings on the merits of the case and on jurisdiction as well, in a complete sense. At the end of it, if the court finds that India is right in claiming that the provisions of the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations were breached, what the court can order is simply, it can ask Pakistan to review and reconsider the conviction and sentencing in light of the fact that consular access was not given to this person, so to Mr. Jadhav, so to check for what prejudices may have resulted in the process because consular access was not given. It can't actually annul the sentence that has been given. It can't also prescribe what Pakistan must do to make sure that the procedure that then follows is an appropriate one. All it can say is that Pakistan, in its discretion, can decide how to review and reconsider the conviction and sentencing. For India is something quite important actually in terms of just litigation strategy, which is that the one thing they can do is ask the court to clarify, to provide more instruction on what counts as appropriate review and reconsideration. This is a strategy that Mexico followed a few years ago and was able to get some clarifications, including, importantly, that a simple clemency procedure will not be enough. There has to be something more. Reconsidering the entire conviction as well as the sentence. So that's, I think, something India can pursue. Beyond that, the enforceability of ICJ decisions tend to raise problems in situations where states are not willing to comply.
Right. And while this case is pending in the ICJ, what happens to the appeal that has been filed in Pakistan? Does that case go on parallelly?
That case can go on. Part of the ordinary judicial procedure. Pakistan, I mean, it's interesting. I'm not sure if consular access is not granted in the course of that appeal, it doesn't change the consideration that the court can bring to bear upon it, which is to say that Pakistan might complete the entire appeal procedure and confirm the sentence. But if the court were to find that because consular access was not given, that creates problems for the probity of the process, then there might be call for Pakistan to, again, in a fresh way, review and reconsider. So it might mean that there'll be a superfluity of now.
Right. Michael Kugelman, as you would appreciate, this is also a case which has a political dimension in India. While some say that go ahead and save Jadhav, but do not allow Pakistan to internationalize bilateral disputes, bilateral issues. The other side says that this is a perfect example. If Pakistan chooses to not comply, you can hold it accountable and say Pakistan's been asking the UN to intervene in the Kashmir issue forever, and now for once a UN body has adjudicated and Pakistan isn't following.
Well, yeah, absolutely. You make a good point. And I brought this up on your show a few days ago. It's ironic in many ways that for so many years Pakistan has tried unsuccessfully to internationalize the Kashmir dispute, and now you have a case of India wanting to internationalize a very different aspect of the India-Pakistan dispute, and it was successful. But I think that in some ways both countries benefit. Obviously, India benefits because it basically won. It got the verdict that it wanted to. But Pakistan also wins out because, as I think was mentioned before, more attention is being brought to what is going on on the subcontinent, and certainly in Washington and in other key Western capitals as well. I think that people are not really watching the India-Pakistan relationship as much as many in Pakistan would want it to be watched. Pakistan, of course, wants more people to be paying attention so that more people sympathize with Pakistan's position on Kashmir. So, in effect, by bringing this case to an international court, both countries end up benefiting. Again, as I said before, this is not generating banner headlines here in Washington. Very few people are talking about it. But that said, I think it is important that both countries are now in a position where a lot more people outside of India and Pakistan have a better sense, or could have a better sense, as to what is going on with this case and what the positions are of both India and Pakistan.
Captain Raghuraman, how do you see this playing out politically? The Prime Minister has been talking about the global isolation of Pakistan in this context, and this is only going to give the government a shot in the arm.
Which government? A shot in the arm?
The Modi government.
I don't believe that I don't believe that narrative of Pakistani isolation. I think it needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. You have seen the bonhomie that has started now between China and Russia. You know that with the OBOR and the CPEC, now the issue is far bigger than China and Pakistan. The world attention is almost 70 countries have their stake in some shape or form. Pakistan has very successfully brought China into their southern region of Balochistan, so that any attempt that India might have considered in the future will now run the risk of drawing China into the fracas, and that's something that India cannot even from a military point of view cannot even think of a 2.5 front war. So in many ways I kind of endorse the point that Pakistan uses these opportunities to constantly keep. So let's play it another way. I mean, in the past, there have been several instances, both on our borders and even in the hinterland, when people have been arrested, people have been fishermen, hundreds of fishermen are arrested, and people don't even know what happens to them. So for Pakistan to find one person and to parade him over the world, it's not a necessity. I mean, Pakistan is not known in the world as somebody who follows the letter of the law in spirit. So for them to have paraded this, it is not so much to get one supposed spy. It is to showcase and constantly keep this conflict in the world arena and the world stage. And to my mind, the way it's going to be wargamed is all these options will be tried, and eventually the last option, which is appealing to the Pakistani president and him in his largesse, allowing this person to live, is the way the end game is going to come out. So eventually, Pakistan, to my mind, at this stage, holds all the cards. They can continue to drag this case. They can continue to play with the sentiments. They can continue, like proof of life. They can drag that on, and if he's alive, they will, sort of ration this literally on a daily basis and milk this story until they find another one where they can bring the attention back to this conflict between India and Pakistan.
Surabhi, what kind of a timeline are we looking at specifically at the ICJ?
Well, it's going to take a while. Now, it depends on whether we now have a one-step process or a two-step process. The two-step process is where the court might consider jurisdiction issues separately from the merits. Looking at the nature of the pleadings, the fact that the jurisdiction objection is being pleaded on the basis that the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations does not apply per se because of the bilateral agreement, my guess is that the court will club the jurisdiction and merits hearing. But this means that this might take even longer for the case to come to a final decision. The court has a very full docket. There are lots of cases, including, of course, the big one, the Ukraine-Russia case. It could take up to more than a year, 18 months, even going up to 2 years from now.
All right, I'm going to leave it at that. Captain Raghuraman, Surabhi Ranganathan, Michael Kugelman, thank you all for joining us here on Gravitas and sharing your perspective. While Jadhav's family and friends are celebrating, many in Pakistan have slammed the government for participating in the ICJ proceedings. What's important to note is also that Pakistan has rejected today's order. Here's more.
As the 11-judge bench at the ICJ, headed by Justice Ronny Abraham, read out the order in India's favour, extending a reprieve to former Indian Navy man Kulbhushan Jadhav, the Indian government claimed a big diplomatic victory.
This order, though interim, is a very serious indictment of the kind of mockery in the name of judicial system that exists in Pakistan.
The provisional relief which India has been granted on its request. It constitutes an essential first step in ensuring justice for Mr. Jadhav.
The bench decided to uphold India's demand seeking consular access under Article 36 of Vienna Convention. It also struck down Pakistan's reservations about the body's limited jurisdiction. The nuanced order being hailed by legal experts in India.
I think it's a very, very big win for India. It's a win for human rights.
But within minutes of the order, Pak media went into an overdrive, accusing the government of not having put forward their case strongly. The criticism forcing Pakistan government to clarify and try and pacify public opinion. Humiliated by the snub at The Hague, Pak claiming that it will maintain status quo.
Court has given has said nothing on the merits or maintainability of the case.
Round 1 of the legal and diplomatic face-off goes to India, but the larger ramifications of the order remain yet to be seen. Bureau Report, WION.
With that, we are heading into a short break. Up next, a curtain raiser on the Iranian presidential election and why the world is watching closely.